What would you do if a judge sentenced you to life in prison? That would be distressing every day, right? Scary too, and some people found it difficult to maintain their calm after hearing the news. These are the most dramatic reactions of killers receiving their sentence. Number 1. Dainta Wright. When someone tells you that they've lost their only child, their son, their baby, and their friend, it's only natural for you to feel sadness. You might also feel a great deal of remorse if you're the reason why someone isn't alive. But when a victim impact statement was read out to the court, and the person responsible for murdering 18-year-old Jordan Clee, the court was in shock. The defendant, 17-year-old Dainta Wright, who was sentenced to 23 to 50 years in prison, smiled and nearly laughed when his lawyer attempted to say that his client said it was never his intention to injure. Dainta interrupted him to address the court himself. You might think that at this point, he might express remorse from the heart, but that is not what happened at all. Instead, he smiled as he said, "I just wanted to tell y'all I'll be home soon. I love my family. I'll tell y'all I'll be home soon or I'll be kion. I love my family. This definitely wasn't well received by most people in the courtroom. The judge asked prosecutors if the sentencing agreement was too merciful. He followed up by saying that, watching Dainta sitting there smiling, laughing, and shaking his head like it was no big deal. He was tempted to say he wasn't going to accept the sentencing agreement, then take the case to trial. If convicted of felony murder, that would mean Dainta would be in for the rest of his life. That means you'll die there. That's what I'm tempted to do, the judge said. Number 2. Antonio Barbeau. Antonio was just 14 years old when he was sentenced to spend at least 36 years in prison for the murder of his 78-year-old great-grandmother with a hatchet, along with a friend, Nathan Pape. He visited Barbara Olson's home to steal money, and then they took their turns to beat her with a hatchet and a hammer. Yeah, the crime was as horrific as it sounds. Oh, when Antonio was handed the 36-year sentence and tried to read his apologetic statement, he broke down in tears. He wasn't able to read the statement through his tears and passed it to his defense attorney to read. He too struggled to fight back the tears while reading it. According to news stories, in around 2013, after the crime took place, Antonio's great-grandmother invited both boys into her home. When her back was turned so that she could call Antonio's mother on the phone, he hit her in the head with a hatchet. Feeling sick, he ran to the bathroom, and Nathan hit her multiple times with a hammer. According to Judge Timothy Von Akron, the 36-year sentence was the minimum for the crime, which he said was nothing short of horrific. He also said in his 24 years on the bench, he had never seen anything remotely close to the nature of the crime. Antonio will be around the age of 50 before he is eligible for release. Number 3. Jaleel Smith Riley. Jaleel Smith Riley was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2016 for shooting and killing Portia Brooks and severely injuring her boyfriend Aaron Martin during a robbery. Portia and Aaron were sitting in a parked car in Norwood when Jaleel approached the vehicle with 2 others and ordered Aaron to get out. When Jaleel discovered that he had nothing of value to take, he shot him in the head, before leaning into the vehicle and shooting Portia as well. A Crime Stoppers tip led the police to Jaleel, who was charged with aggravated murder, attempted murder, aggravated robbery, and 2 counts of felonious assault. To avoid the death penalty, he pleaded guilty and faced a sentence of life without parole. When he was sitting in the gallery, Portia's family spoke to the court, and Jaleel then had to try and convince the court that he deserved leniency. He started crying in court with tears rolling down his face. He said, "I just want to come home one day." His attorney stepped in and said Jaleel was someone who felt genuine remorse and thought about what he did every day. He said he couldn't undo what he did. The judge had the final word and sentenced Jaleel to life without parole. As soon as those words came out of his mouth, Jaleel fell to the floor crying. Number 4. Esteban Carrillo. Boston, Massachusetts convicted prison inmate Esteban was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the murder of a policeman. In 2005, when Providence police were questioning him for stabbing an 85-year-old woman, a detective had left the room to get a drink of water for Esteban. This left him alone in the room with Police Detective Sergeant James L. Once the detective had left the room, Esteban grabbed James's gun and shot him twice, resulting in his death. Esteban then jumped out of the 3rd-floor interview room window before being caught less than an hour later. Incredibly, Esteban was brought to the arraignment wearing a mask that was designed to stop offenders from biting or spitting on people. He also had red eyes, cheeks, and a red forehead, along with swelling around his forehead and cranial region. It wasn't so much his crazy reaction that shocked people, but that of his family when he was sentenced to life in prison. His family screamed and yelled about police brutality. An FBI investigation concluded that excessive force had not been used given the circumstances, and that his injuries were sustained when he jumped from the third floor of the building and during his struggle with law enforcement. Like this video, smash the subscribe button, and click the notification bell right now. Number 5. Insane acting man. When a man was charged with possession of a weapon during a violent crime, along with murder, he acted in a way that shortly made the people around him think he was gonna crack at any minute. Not only was he clenching his fist, but he was also making strange sounds, shaking his head and standing before the judge with his teeth bared for the entire time that she was describing how things were gonna play out. The judge also tried to ask the man questions, but he wouldn't answer all of them consistently. Do you answer my questions? When she asked whether he'd like to be screened for a court-appointed lawyer or whether he could hire his own, he didn't answer immediately. He then proceeded to ask the judge whether he looked like he could afford one, and then said he didn't need one. It's not known what the outcome of this case was, but even during the early stages of his case, his reactions were absolutely terrifying. When the video was uploaded to the internet, many people were quick to point out that the man was likely trying to act insane so that he could enter an insanity plea. We're not sure of the case's outcome, but you're surely interested to know whether he managed to keep up this luck. Number 6. Jacob Matthew Morgan. In 2015, a 14-month-old baby died in a house fire while at home with a 17-year-old brother, Jacob Morgan of Rock Hill, South Carolina. Jacob was initially charged with murder and pleaded guilty to the crime. In October 2021, he was charged with involuntary manslaughter, unlawful conduct towards a child, and third-degree arson after setting his home on fire and willfully killing his brother, Joshua Alexander. The court stated that Jacob set 2 fires, exited the home, and left his brother inside to die. Jacob hasn't given any formal statements about how the fire started, but later said he lit a pillow on fire and threw it in the air. Authorities think 2 sets of fires were started, one in the master bedroom where the baby was asleep, and another in the living room. In a probable cause hearing, Jacob cried, pleaded, and prayed with absolute terror in his eyes before he was charged with arson and murder connected to his. He was then led out of the courtroom crying. Eventually, Jacob was charged for the killing of Joshua Hill, and he would be sentenced to 15 years in prison. His mother, Julie Hill, said Jacob has developmental issues and loved his little brother. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more. We'll see you in the next one.